If everybody can take a seat or quiet down a little bit so we can get the show started here. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I am very happy to welcome my fellow employees to the town hall today with Secretary Jewell. My name is Nancy Monroe, and I'm the Director of Internal Communications here at the department. One of the things that I work on here at the department is the One Interior intranet website, which is basically a one-stop shop to get to know what the department is doing and then also what your fellow employees are doing. Another goal of ours is to bridge some of the gaps between offices and bureaus here so that we really truly act like one interior. And I know that the Secretary shares this goal and finds it very important. And there are many employees here, very many, here in D.C. live with me today, and many more via telephone and web. The Secretary is going to offer some remarks, and then there'll be time for questions afterwards, so be prepared, have your questions in mind. So without further ado, I'm truly honored to welcome Secretary Sally Jewell.
And thank you for coordinating your wardrobe with mine today. And the cameraman here and Nikki Buffa, and it's an orange kind of day, a little bit of Rhea Sue, so we all got coordinated on our wardrobes. Just kidding, of course. I'm lucky I can coordinate with myself on my wardrobe in the morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and before I get started on some remarks about priorities and so on, I just want to give a shout out to an announcement that the President of the United States made yesterday as he nominated Mike Connor to be Deputy Secretary of the Interior. Mike, could you stand up wherever you are? So some of you know Mike, some of you probably don't know Mike. He is the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, and he will continue to be that until the Senate says it's okay, and we swear him in with enthusiasm. But he has over 8 years on Capitol Hill working in the Senate. He's very well loved. He has, besides by his wife and family, he's already received very enthusiastic responses from people on both sides of the political aisle, and I think that's going to be enormously helpful. So I couldn't be happier that the President nominated Mike for this role. Couldn't be happier that we're going to work closely together. And we will complement each other's skills because Mike has a deep understanding of some of the challenging issues that we face, particularly around water. He's been a negotiator on Indian water rights for many, many years. He is from New Mexico, which is just a little drier than Seattle. So we bring perspective there, but we both share something in common, and that is a degree in engineering. And that's very useful for his work in reclamation and very interesting for me when I get to go through those facilities. But Mike will bring tremendous leadership and skill and the ability to work across different parts of Interior to this job. So I'm very hopeful that the Senate, once they finish taking their August recess, will confirm him swiftly so that we can get on with the swearing in. So thank you, Mike. So it's been a very interesting 111 days, but who's counting, right? Actually, Booch is counting. Francis Iacobucci, my scheduler, who has given me all kinds of fun facts, like the fact that he has put me on flights mostly not in middle airplane seats, usually on an aisle or a window, which is very helpful, always in coach, pretty much, unless I get lucky and get upgraded, but that's rare. I've gone 1.5 times around the circumference of the Earth, he tells me. That's quite a ways in 111 days. I've been visiting many different places, 15 different states. I think if you add up all of the formal meetings I've had with employees across the country, like this, a little smaller than this, most of the cases, but not all, it's 33 visits with employees. And over the course of that time, I have come to appreciate the incredible work of all of you and your colleagues across the country. And I know we've got a number of people watching over a webcast right now. The work that you do, the dedication that you have to mission, in spite of some of the things that are going on in the crazy budget climate that we're in right now. So thank you for everything you do and all of the effort that you've made, not only to welcome me, but help educate me on what's happening out there, what's working well and what's not working well. what is it about our missions that we really need to focus on? And what are some of the things that maybe we could focus less on to do more of our mission work? So that's been enormously helpful and very rewarding for me. I've had a few challenges since I've been here. The House Interior Appropriations Subcommittee budget would be a good example of that. They are busy now doing a markup between the subcommittee and the full House Appropriations Committee. I know from speaking to a member of Congress last night that there were going to be an awful lot of points made today at the hearing that were shining a spotlight on the inappropriateness of the budget that was passed out of the House Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. And I will be your advocate in this budget process. It is very frustrating to see what came out of the gates at the House. I know that's not where we're going to end up, but I will tell you that I'll go down slugging to get what we can for the good work that you do, because where it's come out is frustrating for all of us. And I did have a chance in a press call earlier this week, as we talked about the economic value of what we do, to make the case about how important investing in Interior is. I will say that acronyms have been a challenge. Even though I was the CEO of REI, therefore I'm used to acronyms. It's legendary here in the federal government, but I'm learning quickly and having to look some up on a daily basis. I will also say that as frustrating as this budget bill was, the first pass in the House Interior Appropriations Committee, that when I meet with individual members of Congress, so many of them do understand the work that you do. So many of them actually do appreciate the work that you do. And they really don't want to support the kind of budget that has been going through. So I will say that there's closet advocates for us that we'd like to be out in the open, and we're going to be making that case. The hardest day on this job was going to the memorial for 19 fallen firefighters. You know, they were a hotshot crew. 19 out of 20 of them died. They died in a fire that reflects the drought conditions, the extreme risk that firefighters throughout this country face, given the landscapes that we're now dealing with, that you all understand better than anybody else. So I hope that if we do one thing to honor those 19 fallen firefighters, it is to raise awareness about the situation that's going on in our land, to get sensible firefighting budgets and priorities out there, because of course you have dry years, you have wet years, you have good years, you have bad years for fire, and we just need to be prepared. So that was a tough day, and I hope that I never have another day that is like that in the time that I'm in this job. This is a very rewarding job. It's every day is not fun, but every day has some fun elements, and some days are just really terrific. The assets that we have are incredible. So as a geeky engineer, going to a facility that I had a quick tour of in Denver after I finished addressing a group about this size, where we test out dams and water movement, and does this screen work for protecting fish or not protecting fish? It's a gigantic mock-up lab of dams and water facilities that we have sitting in Denver, and who knew? Some of you knew, I'm sure Mike knew, but I didn't know, and it was really fun. I've been to wildlife refuges like Loxahatchee in the Florida, the river of grass, if you will, in Florida, and flown over and seen what we as human beings have done when we put the Tamiami Trail in that blocks that flow of water, and how Fish and Wildlife are working along with the Park Service, but private landowners, farmers, to help them understand and to mitigate what they're doing on the lands to help support these landscapes. Because, by the way, the whole South Florida community, 7+ million people, depend on water from that area for clean drinking water supply. I have done a little rock climbing in Red Rocks just outside of Las Vegas on BLM land. What an amazing treasure, right outside that fastest growing giant urbanizing area that we have in Nevada. But also on the same trip, seeing the renewable energy projects that we have that you should be enormously proud of, that are setting a standard for renewable energy development, not just here, but for the world. And doing that on a footprint that is really thoughtfully created through the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. Understanding the habitat for the desert tortoises, working with conservation groups, working with industry, taking lands off the table that are too critical for other purposes, putting lands on the table that are really, really important for renewable energy development. I've been to Wolf Trap a number of times, and who knew that Steve Barton could play a mean banjo? But I know now, and I know along with a number of members of Congress who went with me. I've gone with several of you in the audience to Wolf Trap. I've taken people from our stakeholder groups. That's an amazing resource, unique within the National Park Service, very close by. I hope you've all had a chance to get out there at some point during your time here in Washington, D.C., but it's been a great opportunity for me to tell our story and do it in a fun environment and build relationships with people that are important for us to have relationships with in a setting where you get to know each other on a personal basis. So it's been quite a ride over this 111 days, but who's counting? The most important thing that I feel I've done is to get to know so many of you and to get to know your work you're doing so that I can be an effective advocate. So I want to talk a little bit about where we're going. And I want to start with a couple of themes, actually 3 themes, that I want all of us to really think about, because these are real and they're affecting who we are and what we do. One is that we are at a time of limited resources. I don't need to tell any of you that budgets are not going to get bigger. We can't continue to have a growing deficit over a very long term in this country, and we're all going to be asked to step up. We have been asked to step up. Actually, we've been forced to step up, and actually forced to step up in ways that are not particularly constructive. For example, sequestration. I believe we will get beyond that. I hope we get beyond it next year, but if not, we will get beyond that, and we'll get to a more rational place. And I'm bringing my business experience to every conversation that I have with people on the Hill, people in the White House, people at OMB, as we work together to say, how can we use the resources that we have more wisely? How can we reduce the amount of time that you spend doing things that just seem so inconsistent with mission? And I know they're out there because I've been walking on trails and I've been sitting in offices and I've been talking with people, and I'm gaining a sense of frustration about the things that you have to do with your time that don't seem to make sense to you. So we are going to be in a time of constrained resources, but we are also in a time where the services that we provide are profoundly necessary for the country. And so there's got to be a lot of creativity and some changing up on how we do things, and I ask for your help in doing that, and I'm sure we'll get to some of that in the Q&A. We are in a really privileged position on 2 other trends that are out there because we have a chance to do something about them. One is very important, very much in our face, and really critical, and that is climate change. I hope there are no climate change deniers in the Department of the Interior. If you don't believe in it, come out into the resources, go on to some BLM land, go up to Alaska where the permafrost is melting, go into the Sierra, which used to retain a lot more water in its frozen form, that's now running off the hillsides quicker, and we don't have the storage capacity to be able to serve the downstream users like the demand requires. We have far-reaching impacts in every part of the department, but we are in a unique position to actually be able to do something about it. How exciting is that? You got a changing climate, and you and I can actually do something about it. That's a privilege, and I would argue it's a moral imperative that we've got to step up to. So the president did a major climate speech, as you know. It was certainly a good illustration of global warming, sitting in the front row without any shade on that hot day here in Washington, D.C., hot, humid day. But he talked about his expectations of us. He talked about standing up 20 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2020, and we will get there. We're already around 13 gigawatts of permitted renewable energy, and we can get there and do more. We can do more with hydroelectric, with geothermal, as well as with wind and solar. Today, Tommy Bodrow and the team in Bureau of Ocean Energy Management are conducting the first ever competitive offshore wind energy lease sale. So I don't know how it's going.
It's going great.
It's going great. There you go. Good answer. Nice job, Tommy. So we are in a position to do something, and we are doing something about it. I would also say that we have to understand what's happening on the landscapes. What is causing fires to burn hotter? What is climate change doing to habitats? What's it doing to invasive species? Can we maintain the integrity of our national parks for future generations if we're not thinking about ecosystems that go outside of some of those park boundaries? What is climate change doing to our cultural artifacts? What's it doing to our historic structures? What's it doing to tribal nations, and how do we help tribal nations support the changes that they need to do? So we're in a great place to do something about that, and that is a privilege. Coming from a job in the private sector where we talked a lot about this and we had little opportunity, some opportunity, solar arrays on our stores, reducing our carbon footprint, thinking about what we did within our own business. What we can do is on a scale that is orders of magnitude larger than any individual business could do, even a business the size of Walmart that really works hard on this as well. So I ask you to join me in stepping up to that. The third major trend I want to talk about is that we are a changing nation. We are a nation of a very large demographic group that I'm a part of, the baby boom, people born between 1946 and 1964. The Gen X in between, which is reasonably well represented, I think, in this room, but a much smaller generation, about 45 million strong versus 76 million. And then the millennial generation. Sounded like we had a little woo-woo for Gen X. The millennial generation, people born between 1980 and 1995. So raise hands if you're a boomer, 46 to 64. Okay, that's a good chunk of people in this room. How about an Xer? Okay, a little small, it's pretty reflective. How about a millennial? Okay, great. So we have all the generations. We probably have some traditionals represented in the room. I won't have you raise your hand because you're probably just pretending you're still in the baby boom generation. Because I guarantee you this baby boomer is pretending that she's younger than she really is, and I'm in denial just as most of us are. But the raising of hands that happened out there is a good indication that we have the largest generation here is the baby boom generation. The generation coming up behind it, which my two children are a part of, and I imagine many of you that raised your hand in that first group, children are probably also a part of it, are coming into a workforce that is at a time of economic challenge. Many of them have gone back to grad school or law school or something else because they haven't been able to find jobs. Yet this is our future. And the Gen Xers out there, you're going to have to hold things together when the baby boom retires until that millennial generation's ready. And we need to be part of the solution on this. So the younger generation coming out is more diverse, very tech savvy. We don't have to tell anybody in this room that. Creative and has lots of great ideas. So how do we embrace that? So I want to now shift from those three trends around limited resources, climate change, and changing face of our nation to 6 priorities that I'm hoping, if I do a decent job, all of you will see yourself in this picture. I'm working with the assistant secretaries and the bureau directors to hone the language on this, but basically, they're not radically different than what you have been doing. Maybe a little tweaking, maybe a little change. But one is, and these are not necessarily in priority order, but one is celebrating and enhancing America's great outdoors. That is what we are known for. If we welcome people into our public lands, if they celebrate and enjoy the resource, they will care for the resource, they will advocate with people on the Hill, and we will get the support that we need for these things that are so important to all of us. The economic report we just released, 417 million visitors a year to Interior Department public lands. There's only 300 million people or so in the United States, so some are going more than once. I would be one of those. I hope all of you are one of those as well, and not just running down to the mall on your way to the food truck. That doesn't count. We generated value added. So you could talk to the economists who did a great job on this report. Value added of over $25 billion through our work in America's great outdoors. As part of the outdoor industry before, economic analysis was done a couple times by the industry, most recently released in 2012, saying it's a $646 billion industry. So we're actually taking credit for a very small subset of that in Interior, but I think we have a far broader impact than what's accounted for in these numbers. Insular areas, the South Pacific, the Caribbean nations that are a part of the United States family are also really important areas where tourism and taking care of these landscapes provide economic opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be there. And who wouldn't like to be laying on a beach someplace in the South Pacific? I can tell you, most of you are nodding vigorously. So I agree with you in that. So we need to make the case for the economic benefit of these lands. We already know the conservation benefit. I will also say that this economic report didn't address the conservation benefits because it's very hard to quantify the importance of habitat, the importance of habitat for clean water for us to breathe, to drink, for clean air for us to breathe, for carbon sequestration to offset the carbon pollution that we are all producing, including sitting under coal-fired lights with a little solar thrown in, which is good, meaning skylights. So we have a great opportunity with the upcoming centennial of the National Park Service, which is 3 short years away, to really shine a spotlight on the America's Great Outdoors agenda broadly across all of our public lands. Second is strengthening tribal nations. We are, I think, doing good work when it comes to upholding our trust and treaty obligations to Indian nations across this country. But we have more work to do. The President just released an executive order charging us with developing the White House Council on Native American Affairs and putting me as chair. So this week we had the inaugural meeting of that group. We had 7 cabinet secretaries attend, and it was on relatively short notice. We had almost every single department of the federal government represented. We have lots of programs that are supporting and enhancing Indian country, but I would say we lack strategic focus to make sure we're listening to what tribes want and we're providing the resources that they need. So strengthening tribal nations is something that President Obama cares a lot about, Ken Salazar cared a lot about. We made tremendous progress over the last 4 years, and I hope that that progress continues to accelerate. Recently, yesterday actually, we signed another momentous water agreement with the White Mountain Apache tribe. They have provided basically the uplands that provide the water to Phoenix, and yet had not been really sharing in that water in a way that provided them with clean drinking water. That has all changed because of this settlement, and $200 million that will be put into those programs and projects, with another $80 million that we hope Congress will appropriate to take care of their habitats as well. Next is powering the future, and that is around energy. The President's all the above energy strategy, you've heard about that. We are a big part of that. So in that economic report, which I encourage you all to read, it's out on our website, shows that the largest contributor to direct economic activity is the oil and gas production that we do on our public lands. It's an important part of what we do. It also gives us an opportunity to say, when we do develop resources on land, how can we mitigate for that in a way that makes the most sense for our landscapes and our ecosystems. So you will see continued work on blending the best practices we can get out there, whether it's from states or from different bureaus within the Land and Minerals Corridor, automating our processes, bringing certainty and clarity to industry, but also doing it in a way that enhances our safety. And we've seen that. You know, there was I'm sure you all know, if you've been watching the DOI news, there was another well blowout in the Gulf just a week or so ago. No people lost their lives, no people were hurt. It was safely evacuated. The teams responded immediately. They got on that case. There's a relief well that's already been permitted that is, I think, getting underway, and it's drilling today. A good example of it's a risky business. We need to make sure we're prepared, and I'm really proud of the Bessie folks for their reaction to that, and the fact that it's not had the major implications that the last big oil spill in the Gulf did that you're all aware of, and that's because some great work has been done there. So we will meet President Obama's goal of 20 gigawatts of renewable energy. That's going to be an important part of our portfolio. But also we will be continuing to support the industries in the conventional side that are so necessary to get us bridged into a less carbon-oriented future. Next priority is around engaging the next generation. So the little show of hands I did was intentional to show that we've got some work to do, both here, but also if we want to have people on the Hill a generation from now, or even a half generation from now, that will vote for a budget for Interior, these young people need to have had some sort of experience on our public lands. So I want to applaud the efforts of Interior on the 21 CSC, the 21st Century Civilian or Conservation Service Corps, excuse me, I keep mixing it up with the CCC. The CCC itself, back at the last Great Depression, did so much, and after World War II as well, putting young men who were unemployed or underemployed to work on public lands, that those now 90-year-olds, if they're still living, have a connection to that place that will never leave them. We have a chance to do that again today. So youth programs, volunteer programs, leveraging relationships with organizations like the Student Conservation Association and core networks around the country, working with private industry. Like last night, I was at a National Park Foundation event, and there were several businesses there. I talked with Pacific Gas and Electric, with Toyota, with Coca-Cola. There are others there. National Park Foundation is doing a good job of reaching out into the private sector, whether it's about the centennial or whether it's engaging with young people on public lands. These are companies that are interested in getting their own workers out onto public lands. REI, we did a lot of this kind of work. People love this work. It makes a difference in public lands, and it gives them a connection to place that will never leave them. So I am very focused on making sure that we leverage public-private partnerships to work with youth groups, that we bring back as many internship programs and seasonal work programs and so on that give all of you that are here a chance to do a mind meld, especially if you're my generation, with younger generations, so that we in fact have continuity in our good work, but we're doing it with some creative energy that we all benefit from. Next on priorities is Mike Connor's favorite, and that is assuring sustainable, secure water supplies. It's not very sexy. Mike thinks it's sexy, which is good, because we need that. I'm probably more on the kids in the outdoor thing in terms of getting really, excited about it. But the reality is we are in a severe drought situation, and climate change is impacting water like nothing else, and none of us can survive without water. We can't grow agricultural crops, we can't support stream flows, we can't have a healthy ecosystem if we don't have water. I learned traveling with the Bureau of Reclamation folks and being at a conference of the Western governors that the stream flows into the Colorado River are at basically the bottom 1% when you look back over a paleo record of 1,200 years. The bottom 1 percentile over 1,200 years. We're in real trouble when it comes to the drought situation and recharging water and the ability to store water at a time when those freezing levels are going up. So this is very, very important, and we are the nation's largest supplier of wholesale water. And we do play an important convening role because the states allocate that water to make sure that everybody's learning from each other. We're working with primary water users and secondary water users and getting agreements that make sure that we don't waste any and we use it to the best possible purpose. And then last, but certainly not least, and very, very important, is what I'm calling building a landscape level understanding. So your U.S. Geological Survey is the geospatial platform for the United States, oversees the geospatial platform. GIS technology is here, and we can put all kinds of information in to make it readily accessible to make smart decisions. So the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan is a little slice of this. It's a great illustration of what can be done. We can do this on a landscape level. So when we're drilling for oil and gas or permitting a coal mine or some other kind of development on the surface, where do we best mitigate? Where are those critical lands for us to take care of, and how do we do that in a more thoughtful way? So those are the 6 priorities that I've identified, and I'll just whip through them quickly again. Celebrating and enhancing America's great outdoors, strengthening tribal nations, powering the future, engaging the next generation, assuring sustainable, secure water supplies, and building a landscape-level understanding. So I hope you are up for joining me on this journey with tighter resources than we've had before, which means more creativity, opportunity for all of us to step up and try and be smarter in how we do things. I just want a quick show of hands of all of you who manage anybody, who are supervisors or managers of anybody. Okay, so all of you that manage people, I'm going to hold you accountable for listening to those who didn't raise their hands, or even those who did, when they tell you that I'm doing something that makes no sense to me. I don't understand why. It's not consistent with our mission. Can I stop doing it? So I want you who raised your hands to listen to that and to move up the chain so that it eventually gets to the decision maker. Maybe it's me, maybe it's beyond me, but chances are it's within your organizations to stop doing some of the things that seem to get in the way with our ability to carry out our mission. Because in a time of constrained resources, it's creating an environment for everyone to say, this isn't working for me, and to make suggestions, and for the leaders here to listen to that, to accumulate that data, and to do something about it that's going to make a difference. So thank you very much for your attention and your all the great work that you do, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thanks. Gentleman back here. I think we have a mic runner. We have a mic runner? I don't see anybody running. Oh, here we go.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Secretary, sorry about that.
You can call me Sally, it's easy.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm the National Vice President for Blacks in Government. I'm here also with President here of the Department of Interior chapter. My question to you is this. There's been a report that's been out, and it's called the Federal Employment Opportunity Recruitment Program Report. And this report for the last decade, 10 years now, has shown that African Americans out of a workforce of about 58,000 only represent 3,340. And we should, according to the civilian standard report for the OPM, says that we should be at a number of about 9,000. Now that's out of 18 cabinet level organizations. The Department of the Interior has remained consistently for the last decade below the civilian standard. So my question is, what could you do maybe to bring those numbers up to where they would be on par with the other 18 cabinet level organizations? And the next question is, out of $214 million that was allocated from the Department of Interior to higher education learning, schools of higher education, only $2 million of that went to historically black colleges and universities. So that's two questions that we just want to know. What could you do to bring those numbers up to par, as well as Blacks in Government supports you. We're glad you're on board. We just want to tell you that. And certainly, and I think my president, she may want to ask a question or two to you as well.
Yes, thank you, Kim Lambert, President for the Department of Interior chapter. We're glad you're on board. We love hearing what your priorities were. One of the things that concern us, we've been looking at the data so many years, and with all due respect to the positive things that are being done to bring diversity and inclusion here, they're overshadowed by some things. It was Abraham Lincoln who tasked the Secretary of Interior at the conclusion of slavery to deal with race relations. We were in first place. We're in last now. The president just said not long ago, we need to talk about race. We need to have those conversations. Within Interior, 78% of those that are 15s and above are white. Grades 13, 14, we are now at 79.1% white. It's virtually impossible for us to reach parity. So we would like to invite you to meet with us and have dialogue. We just don't raise the issues, but we come up with positive recommendations. And one of the good things we have done is given over 60 scholarships. These are employees contributing their own dollars to students. We've helped kids in South Africa, Detroit, New Orleans, but I'm going to table my rest because we don't want to take up a lot of time giving, fair opportunity to others. But we have concluded we have institutional racism, and that's predicated on a number of reports.
Okay, thank you for your comments. There's a lot of questions in there, and first I'm happy to sit down and meet with the group. So you can work with my team, Laura and Booch, and we'll get that set up. I will say this, that I'm very committed to creating an interior that is welcoming and inclusive of everyone. I will also say that inertia is powerful. And to move to affect real change means that we need a pipeline of talent. And we need your help in developing that pipeline of talent. This underrepresentation by blacks in particular, but could be applied to other groups as well, oftentimes has to do with hiring and not recruiting. And so, you know, our parents are involved in wildlife biology, so we become wildlife biologists. We are involved with a group of friends, and so we recommend that this person maybe get hired for this job. I think it's important for all of us as employers to reach out and do recruiting and not just hiring, and I think that's really important. But I would also say that it would be helpful within the African American community to help us identify talent and make sure that we can hold our managers accountable to looking broadly at the talent pool that's available, but also making sure that that talent pool is full. When you look at where our offices are, and you look at the people within those communities, we want to make sure we're representative of the communities that we're serving. And so most of our 70,000 employees are spread widely across the country, and I think we need to understand that on a community level as well to be realistic. But certainly we have work to do, and I'm committed to doing that work. I know Rhea has been a leader in this. Interior, believe it or not, in spite of your statistics, Interior was leading an effort with other agencies to talk about our efforts on diversity and inclusion. And so I know we have work to do. We need your help to be able to do that effectively. The science, the grants, I have no knowledge of that, so perhaps you can provide me with some of that information before we get a chance to meet, and I can better understand your needs. But I completely agree that it's important that we focus on that. Thank you. There's a question up here and one here. So, Pat, do you want to bring your mic over here and we'll handle this one first? That one's fine. No, right here. Yeah.
Hello, Secretary Jewell. It's so nice to see you again. I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for signing my autograph. It meant a lot to me because no secretary has signed the autograph before of a picture or anything that I have done in the agency. So I work for Civil Rights Office. So I am so glad to have you as our secretary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
Thank you so much, Secretary Jewell, for your energetic and enthusiastic remarks. My name is Stephen Morris. I'm with the Park Service's International Affairs Office, and I'm wondering if you could give some comments on your thoughts about the role of the department internationally. You mentioned climate change. You mentioned budgetary constraints. We have the leader of our climate change response program is in Colombia this week advising the Colombian Park Service on dealing with climate change. It's a global issue.
Yes.
But it's also very challenging to do this kind of work when we're facing these severe budget constraints.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. We have gifts that we can offer the world, and the world is struggling under climate change, and I think we have a moral obligation to help bring that expertise to the world. How do you juggle it with all the other things that we've got in our portfolio? It's tricky, and I think it's important that those kinds of issues get raised to leadership and that they help prioritize your time under the circumstances. The work of the Fish and Wildlife Service in the illegal trafficking of wildlife species is just devastating the African elephant population right now and the rhino population. Dan Ash and Woody and the teams are working to do something about this, and we are engaged in an effort internationally to combat illegal wildlife trafficking. You know, these are points of contact where we may be able to use ourselves strategically and effectively to help make a difference. We also have things to learn from other parts of the world. So one of the disappointments I think that we all feel right now in these constrained budget times is restrictions on travel and restrictions on getting together with our peers. And those are important. They're morale boosting. They help lift us up as professionals. And so we will be looking at ways to cut out some of the things that don't seem to add value to mission to bring some of that stuff back, because I think it's really important. I also know that if I'm in John Jarvis's situation and I'm looking at constrained resources on the ground and a centennial coming up and a lot of priorities, I have to think through where do I prioritize those resources most effectively. So, you know, I turn to the bureau heads for that, but John can turn to me to say, you know, do we really have to do these things that seem to be wasting our time so that we can spend more time sharing our wisdom? And I think when you think about the generational transfer of knowledge, and you think about how much capacity there is within Interior to share our knowledge widely, it's very broad. I would also say let's get creative. Are there ways that we can help internationally without actually having to go? Are there ways we can use technology and video teleconferencing and GIS mapping and all of that stuff that can help us in ways that are maybe more cost effective, and maybe they're 80% as effective in terms of spreading the word? But thanks for the question. Other questions from the floor? Nancy, you might have some on, some people submitted some things in writing, and I think we've also got a live stream with some questions coming in too. So do you have any on there?
This one comes from Shauna from the Bureau of Land Management. It says, drawing from your experience in the private sector, are there any beneficial business practices you would like to see the DOI put into practice in your experience so far?
Okay, thanks to Shauna and BLM for that question. Some of you have heard me talk about my favorite business book. I might have even said this in the first meeting that we had, Orbiting the Giant Hairball. What it talks about is the fact that any large organization just gets more and more unwieldy and bureaucratic over time. And some of that is, you know, something bad happens, and so you put a layer of hair on the hairball to address that, and something else happens. And I can tell you, and I know I can speak for Mike Connor too, having recently been through the vetting process, that there's no hair left off the hairball when it comes to the questions that you get asked. So the book also talks about that's inevitable to a certain extent. How do you enable creativity to sort of fly outside the orbit, to give people an opportunity to try new things? When I was working on the Second Century Commission on the National Parks, now back in 2008, whenever that was, John, when he was a regional leader in the Park Service, was orbiting the giant hairball in Santa Monica Mountains and flying outside some of the rules and regulations. I think that he's probably now changed, or he's still flying outside them, but it's a good example of how do you bring urban youth into a national park when you've got a very small amount of land, a very small resource, a huge population center that's made up of a lot of people of color who have never had a connection or been welcomed into nature close by. And it's leveraging those resources to get kids in, using National Park Service money for school buses to transport the kids there. In business, we do those kinds of things. You sort of try and allow creativity to flourish. And I think that there are lessons we can learn from business in that. I would also say that business is not a panacea. It is very difficult to stop doing things. Any organization. I go through this exercise called Continue, Stop, Start, and we'll be doing some of this with my team. But you know, what's Sally doing you want her to continue doing? What's she doing that's driving you crazy you want her to stop doing? And what is it she's not doing you really want her to start doing? The hardest thing is the stops. It always is. It's hard for business. It's hard for us. Because somebody can come up with a reason to say we need to keep doing this. And a lot of it is we as human beings don't like to change. There is comfort in doing what we have done. There is comfort in rote. And it's hard to let go of the from if you don't know what the to is. So we see this in parts of this country that may be moving from a resource-based extractive economy into a tourism-based economy. And yet they want to be involved in that extractive industry, whether it's logging or coal mining or fishing. As resources get impacted, it's hard to let go of that from until you can see what that future is. And the same would apply to us. So I would say, for those of you that are leaders, as you're trying to move your organization forward, or frankly, those of you that aren't leaders, help shape what that to looks like. If you want to orbit the hairball, you can paint a picture of what that to looks like and convince your boss that you want to be in orbit, and they will support you in that endeavor. If we want to have a more diverse and inclusive workforce here, how do we paint that picture? What is it about our environment at Interior that might be not getting the pipeline of talent from the African American community that we aspire to have? What is it in the interview process? What is it in the way the jobs are created? What is it that we're doing that we could change. These are lessons, I'd say, I've learned from business that are very applicable here, but it is not easy to change for any of us. And as leaders, you have to paint a picture of the why. Why is this change necessary? Why is it okay for you to stop doing this thing that you've always done because that's your job? And to say that is no longer your job's now over here. It's very hard for people to let go of that. So I just encourage you to stay tenacious about that, to question what you're doing, and to try and find, if you're a leader, to explain the reasons why, which will help paint a picture of that too that people will want to go to. Do you have a question here?
Hi, Laura Cohen with the National Park Service. And I was wondering if there is a strategy or goals out there for the department to increase our outreach to veterans and military families, and to make sure that we as public servants are educated and prepared to fully welcome them onto the lands that they fought for. Thank you.
Thanks. Great question, and I'm learning a lot about this. I have met many, many veterans. How many veterans here? Just raise your hands. Great, so that's terrific. Thank you. I sense a real commitment on the part of the leadership here to veteran hiring. I have not yet spoken with my colleague Rick Shinseki about this. I will. The 21 CSC, 21st Century Conservation Service Corps, is a great opportunity, I think, to engage veterans as they return. And frankly, it would be a wonderful opportunity, if possible, to engage active duty military who are no longer deployed. They know how to organize, they know logistics, they know how to build stuff, they know how to lead, they know how to create an environment that is welcoming. And I just can't think of a more qualified group to help take what I envision to be many, many kids from big cities and rural areas, but particularly big cities, who have never had a connection to the land, who are crying for skills and opportunity to feel valued in the work they do. So I've been on hundreds of service projects myself. I've done 3 since I've been here. One was with the Student Conservation Association up in Jamaica Bay, with Park Service? Yeah. Down on the mall here, and also with City Park in Portland. In every one of those cases, there were young people involved. In the case of the mall, it was DOI vets, along with folks from General Electric, and we were spiffing up the memorials in advance of Memorial Day. But when I have worked on the land with young people, it has given them a sense of place. When you think about deployed veterans and what they're coming back with, I just can't think of a better opportunity to both feel valued, but also put those skills to work and do it in a way that just heals the mind. So that's one opportunity, certainly, but I know we have preferences in government hiring for veterans, and so they get to the top of the list, we get a chance to see them, and I know that that veterans hiring goes on all over, and I'm certainly very supportive of that. Nancy, got another one?
Yeah. This is from Stephen from the National Park Service. I would like to know your direction for the youth programs within the Department of the Interior, such as Pathways, Youth Rangers, Park Police Explorers. Due to sequestration, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel to fund these wonderful projects for our youth?
Okay, so you heard me say that was a priority of mine, overall, not just in the Park Service, but overall. So when you say to priority, it means you want to disproportionately fund that as opposed to something else. So we're going to try and find ways to fund it. You know, we're in the thick of looking at the 2015 budget. We don't have a 2014 budget. We don't really have a 2013 budget. This is all very new to me. But preparing that next generation, doing that transfer of knowledge is really important. And you know, we do hire 17,000 young people over the course of the summer here. That's great, but it's down from 20,000. And I'd love it to be 25,000. So we will work on ways to do that, but we have to find the money to do it. And so we're trying to make that case. In the back, you had a question?
Yes. My name is Jonathan McGee. I have a question. One of your initiatives were climate change. One of the things that can help curb climate change is that... Oh, I apologize. One of the things that can help curb climate change is telework. I believe that telework is cost effective, it's efficient, and also it reduces our carbon footprint. So is there an initiative to push more telework in the Department of Interior as a whole?
Okay, the short answer is I don't know. So let me give you a quick comment on telework, and then Rhea, I don't know if you've got anything to add. I would say that it's more of a department-by-department basis on what makes sense. So at REI, we did facilitate telework where it made sense, and a lot of people took advantage of it. And yes, it absolutely reduced the carbon footprint, and as a business, we counted employee commuting in looking at what our carbon footprint was as an organization, and we reported on that quarterly. And so some jobs really lend themselves to telework. For example, call centers. Doesn't matter where you are. I don't think Southwest Airlines actually has a physical place for their call center. I think it's just in people's homes. I'm sure they've got some rule about babies and dogs barking and crying in the background when you're making your reservation, but some jobs really lend itself to that. Other jobs, it's very, very difficult, so it really depends. I would say we have many jobs that lend themselves also to people with disabilities, and yet I see relatively few people with disabilities working here or in many workplaces. So we have opportunities to leverage technology in many ways. I don't think it's a panacea in terms of saving a ton of money, and I do know that it is requires really good leadership to make sure that the goals are in place and you can monitor performance and you can hold people accountable, because and that actually takes a lot of work. So it's not necessarily applicable everywhere, but technology helps facilitate it. And you'd think that one of the places where you couldn't telework would be running Hoover Dam, right? But I was at Hoover Dam and I was talking with the operators, and they're actually operating several dams from one location using electronics. I hope the lines don't go down. So I think it's an opportunity, but I would not say, having my own experience in business, that it is something that everyone can do and that it works. And if you think about interior broadly, you can't telework when you're removing invasive species, or you're counting desert tortoises, or you are interpreting a visitor experience. So it really depends. Do you want to add anything to that, Rhea? No, she thinks that's okay. So good ideas. If you've got a good idea on why you want to telework and why you think it makes sense, I'd say talk to the boss that raised their hand and tell them why, and maybe it can be arranged. Yeah, Jake.
My name is Jake King. I'm interning with the DOIU department. I have a question regarding people with disabilities. I know there was a question asked about recruitment and employment for disabled veterans. Is there any program out within the department or within the federal government that lends itself to recruiting just people in general with disabilities, as far as going out to universities or different companies and specifically gearing your programming towards that section of employment?
So I would say, thanks, Jake, for the question. I think that the question about veterans was veterans broadly. It wasn't just disabled veterans. It was all veterans, and certainly disabled veterans being an important group of that. I think that in the way I answered the question, the very first question that I got, I think understanding where talented people are and recruiting, as opposed to just hiring, is an important way to reach groups of people no matter where they are, and that includes people with disabilities. I think in your work as an intern, as you identify groups of talented people that have an opportunity to work here, I think raising awareness that there are many jobs that people can do that are in a wheelchair, or maybe they're hearing impaired, or they're sight impaired, or mobility impaired in some way, that's entirely appropriate. And I think that we should be thinking broadly about talent no matter where their talent is. But I think advocacy is helpful, and raising awareness is helpful. So I think something that, as I'm trying to understand our recruiting and what happens within bureaus and what happens in a centralized level, and I keep looking at Rhea because I know she's involved in those things, but I think we share your your interest and commitment, but I would encourage you to educate us, Jake, on where we could be better, where those points of opportunity are that we may be missing to get some talented folks in. We
run out of time.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Good afternoon.